Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Thursday evening. Welcome to the show. We've got a great bunch of stories for you guys today, including how Donald Trump spent D-Day. Fun. Then we have, of course, Donald Trump's economy exposed, what happened after the Trump tax cuts. I know, it's a story I've done 100 times, but I'm going to keep doing it until people stop believing in freaking trickle-down. So we're going to talk about that. Then we have social media goes after Mike Huckabee for one of his ridiculous jokes. And let me tell you what, he did not see that coming. Yeah, I know. Yeah, we'll get to it. Trust me. Then we've got the DNC. It's been a while since we talked about the DNC. Their newest, I'm not going to say the word because I'm trying not to swear, but they are screwing with the debates. I'll tell you how. Then we have a store owner calling the cops on a black man for asking a question. Questioning while black. So, here we go again. I know. It keeps, and of course the details in that story are pretty damning, as well as the just the amount of salt, by the way, from the store owner defending himself is even better. So we'll get to that story. Lots of fun, like I said today. Not as much Trump stuff, but still fun. Okay, now, before we get into the story, I want to thank everybody, first, for joining us today. Please like and share the stream. Very, very important. Helps get the word out. We've actually been doing really, really well in overall channel views. It's like, we're doing pretty good, but live show views, still not the best. So I want to get more people involved in the live show, more interaction, more fun. Again, I love answering your, responding, I should say, to your comments and answering your questions. So I love the engagement. So please share that out any way you can, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, and do that, and that helps you out, or it helps me out when you do that. Okay, anyway, tripping over my words already, but at least I don't have a teleprompter. One of the things that's hashtags that's trending right now on Twitter is teleprompter. Apparently, Joe Scarborough thinks Donald Trump has finally become presidential because he read from a teleprompter and didn't crap his pants. Wow. Congratulations. I didn't even decide to do that story today because of how ridiculous it is. And it's just another reason why people despise corporate media like MSNBC. Okay, anyway, yeah. Before we get into it, too, I want to thank some patrons, patreon.com/UIDNation. I want to thank Peter Jasunskis. I'm terrible with names. I'm sorry. Susan Larson, Liz Sweat, Greg Resnick, and Randall Asado, as well as Karen Von Schmidt. So thank you to those people. I'm sorry I cannot say names. You could always sign up to become a patron and watch me butcher your name while helping the show. But again, all of it goes to help the show. And I thank you because the show would not literally exist without you guys. And so thank you. Okay. Patreon.com/TYTNation. All right, let's go move forward. Okay. And here we go. Oh, boy. Now, President Trump went on a rant against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and former special counsel Robert Mueller during an interview with Fox News. Now, this was with host Laura Ingraham, and this interview happened during what was supposed to be an event honoring the veterans of D-Day on the shores of Normandy. So Trump literally went to do an interview when he was supposed to be out there honoring the soldiers involved in the Normandy invasion. Well, that's great. Now, during this interview, he went after Pelosi, calling her Nervous Nancy. Quote, Nancy Pelosi. I call her Nervous Nancy. Nancy Pelosi doesn't talk about it. Talk about what? I feel like we need a little bit of context in this quote. I'm assuming they were talking about her lack of impeachment. Interesting thing, though, Pelosi had also talked about, or at least this had just come out, she talked about how she didn't want Trump impeached. She wants Trump in prison. Well, now, wait. How do you get Trump out of office so that he can be punished for his felonies? Oh, right. You get him out of office through impeachment. Maybe you should get on that, Nancy. Maybe he's right. Maybe she is nervous, Nancy, because she's nervous about impeachment and not wanting to, I don't know. Okay. Take that back just a little bit. She's nervous because she's trying to make a political calculation that she's afraid that she's going to lose. But in reality, this shouldn't be based on politics. Impeachment shouldn't be. It should be based on whether or not the president has committed actual crimes. We'll get to that later. Now, he also continued, he said, quote, Nancy Pelosi is a disaster. Okay, she's a disaster. Let her do what she wants, you know. You know what? I think they're in big trouble. Big trouble. Big trouble for what? The only thing I can think of, again, for Nancy, is ignoring both of Donald Trump's felonious behavior. That would be obstruction of justice and campaign finance violations, two of them related to the Stormy Daniels the payments to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal that were made during the election. But my guess, of course, is that he has no idea. Now, then Trump decided to go after Robert Mueller. He said, let me tell you, he made such a fool out of himself. Because what people don't report is the letter he had to do to straighten out his testimony because his testimony was wrong. Okay. As usual, no, Trump is the one who was wrong. Okay. So Mueller said in his May 30th remarks that because of the Department of Justice and the Department of Justice guidelines, he did not believe that his office could charge the president with obstruction of justice. He couldn't bring charges against the president. He also told investigators that he could not confidently say that Trump did not commit a crime. Now, later on, representatives for the Justice Department and the special counsel put out a joint statement afterwards saying that Mueller's office concluded that it would not reach a determination about whether the president had committed any crimes. So they're not saying he did do crimes, but they're not saying that he didn't either. I think that is incredibly cowardly on the part of Robert Mueller. But again, that's what we have, right? He, I think, took a political stance, made a political calculation, and said, I don't want to get into this. And look, part of it, of course, is that thanks to Barr, he can't bring charges anyway, right? Mueller also believed that it would be unfair to accuse the president of the United States of crimes, knowing that he would not be able to move forward with charges anyway. Now, he also hinted very strongly that if we wanted to hold the president accountable, we would have to go through Congress. And how do you hold the president of Congress accountable? Impeachment. And so, of course. Now, he didn't say anything in that press conference, by the way, that wasn't already in his report. So all that, I think, was fairly clear. Now, William Barr released his own memo earlier, right? And it did not come to the same conclusions as the Mueller report. That's why Mueller had to come out and speak. And what did Barr say? No collusion, no obstruction. He basically echoed Donald Trump himself. Gee, I wonder why Barr came to that conclusion. Weird. And of course, it's also no wonder why Fox News viewers are unaware that the report actually did point out 10 different counts of obstruction of justice, and that the president had also committed campaign finance violations to which his co-conspirator is currently serving time in prison for. They don't know because Fox News, they never talk about it. And Donald Trump watches Fox News and then goes on Fox News to basically repeat what all the hosts We're already telling it. I mean, it's vomitous. I mean, that's the first word that comes to my mind. Vomitous. Now, all of this was happening as there was supposed to be an event honoring the fallen heroes of World War II. But instead, Trump, on the shores of Normandy, decides to make this whole entire thing about himself and uses the opportunity to attack his political enemies upon the very ground that the greatest generation fought bravely against literal fascists. There's a little bit of irony here. And not only that, but he literally makes them wait so that he can do a stupid interview with Laura Ingraham, one of his biggest sycophants and overall horrible person. If anybody is showing a complete and utter disrespect for the sacrifices of those men, it's Donald Trump, who himself is a wannabe dictator. That day, I'm sorry, D-Day, the D does not stand for Donald, okay? I don't know if he knows that, but D-Day is not about him, despite what we hear from the GOP, which, by the way, GOP chairwoman Ronna McDaniel Romney, right, came out and said, oh, D-Day is a day where we should definitely celebrate the president. We should celebrate Donald Trump. No, we shouldn't. Donald Trump's done nothing. Why should we celebrate the president on this day? No, we should celebrate the fallen men, the heroes that fought literal fascism. Now, to be fair, Donald Trump did talk a little bit about this and about the reason that he was there. So we'll get to that quote. He said, "There was never a more important event than the event 75 years ago today. Think of that. These were incredible, brave people who were just being blown up, and you have graves all over." It's kind of a weird statement, but I mean, I guess it's true. These were people who knew they were going to die. It was horrendous. This was a very, very horrific day, but it was also a very special day, and it's an honor to be here. Now, look, as far as word salad goes, that's very salady, but I guess he tries to make a point like, I don't know, I guess they were getting blown up, but I guess they were brave. All right, fair enough. I'm not going to criticize that one too heavily, right? But look, what's important about this day is that 75 years ago, this was the day that the Nazi dream of conquest over the entire world had effectively been killed. That the fascism of the Nazi regime was doomed to die when the Allies stormed these shores and overwhelmed the Nazi supposedly impenetrable defenses. And this is the day that the Allies took the war to the Germans, to the Nazis, I should say. But of course, sadly, in America, the very thing these people fought for and died to fight against has actually come back. Under this president, you have neo-Nazis openly marching in Charlottesville. They even killed someone during that march. Yet this same president had remarked that there are very fine people on that side. So, look, Donald Trump had some, I guess, nice words in here, but like most of his words, they ring hollow. They don't mean anything when you look at his actions, when you look at his rhetoric, when you look at the kind of thing that he has enabled in this country. Donald Trump being president is a slap in the face to everyone who has died in the beach fighting against both fascism and hate. Okay. All right. Moving on. Now, President Trump continues to claim that his economy is basically the best ever. It is the strongest, the greatest economy. And he is counting on that economy to win re-election in 2020. Now, in reality, the economy has been actually very great for a very small amount of people. That is the wealthiest Americans and largest corporations. Now, according to a report in Axios, American companies are still either hoarding money that they're making or spending it on stock buybacks instead of putting it back into their businesses and creating jobs. Now, this is not exactly breaking news. We have seen this before. We know companies are more interested in short-term profits, which is why they're doing stock buybacks and refusing to raise wages. Now, according to Neil Sheeran, chief economist at Capital Economics, who talked to Axios, he said that companies are reluctant to give their workers raises. Now, why would they be reluctant when they're flush with cash? Well, it turns out they said it's because it would hurt their share values, as Wall Street investors would be less willing to pay top price for shares where there is little expectation of cashing in on dividends or stock buybacks. Now, understand that in this system, they are incentivized to not raise your wages, because raising your wages would actually end up hurting their ability to make more profit. It is a zero-sum game. That means that no matter how many tax cuts and how friendly we are to the business community in corporate America, they will never, and I repeat, never substantially raise wages. Not unless that there is some sort of political pressure. And we have seen that from that kind of pressure from Bernie Sanders when it comes to Amazon and other large corporations. But you have to have that political pressure. All right. Now, here's the thing, right? It is a zero-sum game, right? And since they have a lot of the power, they will do what benefits them the most, which has led to the fact that the wealthy are still sitting on more wealth than they have ever had before. In fact, Axios writes, the top 1% of U.S. households are holding a record of $303.9 billion in cash. Now, for comparison's sake, just before the financial crisis, corporate America held $15 billion worth of cash. They are now doing much, much better than before the financial crisis. Now, it appears to me that more and more the financial crisis served as a vehicle to direct more wealth to the top 1%. They got all the bailouts, and regular people continue to struggle to make ends meet, even after it's been so long since the financial crisis. Now, this system is sick. And I don't mean that it's just broken. No. I mean that it is working as intended, which is sickening and should upset everyone who's watching. Now, the end result of this, of course, is that the money that would have been previously been split between business, workers, and for government projects like, for example, schools, healthcare, infrastructure, is instead sitting in corporate accounts, earning little to no return, according to the report. They're just hoarding that money. And that's it. They're hoarding that money like some sort of fantasy dragon. Think of Smaug from the Hobbit series, right? They're never going to use it. They just hoard the money. And of course, just like in those movies or those books, you even try to come for that money, and it's fire and brimstone in the form of lobbyists, politicians that scream socialism at you while throwing bootstraps. The truth is, that money, the money that is not spent or saved for future expenditures, for example, saving for a new house or saving for retirement or something like that, is basically wasted. It is taken out of circulation. It is being held hostage. It sits there, not being used, not being loaned out, which is also very important. And so there's less of that money, right? Which increases, of course, wealth and income inequality. That money, if loaned out or recirculated, could represent a new house or new car, or, if taxed and given out in distributed to people who need it, it could represent a meal. It could represent a new family being taken care of or being created, or somebody's health care, or even an infrastructure project. That's why we need to tax the rich, Taxing that money takes it out of existence and allows the government to redistribute it, to recirculate resources towards things that we actually need, like infrastructure, which right now is failing. Now, speaking of taxes, right? So now, while corporations and the wealthy ended up getting these massive tax cuts, right? The American people ended up actually paying a lot more. Now, according to IRS figures, the government had pulled in an additional $93 billion for 2018 from taxpayers on individual income taxes than it did for 2017. So understand, this is from individual taxpayers. This is you and me. This is not corporate accounts. Now, this is in part, by the way, thanks to the Treasury Department processing 1.5% more individual returns for 2018 than in 2017. So more people paid taxes. At the same time, last year, big business paid $91 billion less in taxes than they had in 2017. That is prior to the new law's passage. So individuals paid more, corporations paid less. But Jeff, everybody got a tax cut. Okay, that's true, right? Yes, of course everybody got an effective tax cut, right? However, according to an analysis from the Tax Policy Center, the lowest incomes, those making less than $25,000, only got an average tax cut of about $40. So there was a tax cut, but it was not very substantial. Now look, obviously the more you make, the more of a tax cut you got, right? Because the more you pay taxes. So let's look at middle income families, right? Now, these households made between $48,000 and $86,000. And they ended up getting a tax cut of about $800. Okay, so they paid $800 less. Now, the top 1% who made $733,000 or more got an average tax cut of, guess what? About $33,000. That's huge. The difference in these numbers could not be more stark. While you might have got your close to $800 tax cut, if you're lucky enough to be in the middle class, that you might not have even been able to see, by the way, because, look, a lot of people did not know to adjust their withholdings this year. And so they ended up either not getting a return or not getting as big of a return or even having to pay in. And there's been a lot of confusion since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the Trump tax cuts were actually passed. And a lot of people, again, did not know to adjust withholdings. So they end up getting surprised by this massive tax bill they ended up getting. This whole thing, again, is just another piece of evidence that supply-side economics, or what we call trickle-down economics, is just another giant scam to benefit the rich. Okay. I'm going to take a break. We'll come back. We have Twitter versus Mike Huckabee and his so-called sense of humor. Of course, I'm going to take some comments, read some super chats, and we'll come back. We'll do that right after this break. Stay right here around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf here with you. Apparently, I started a debate on what specific battle literally ended the war in World War II. I was saying that it was kind of the start to the end, but look, some people disagree. Talking about, of course, how the failed campaign against the Russians, in the winter, slowed down the Nazi war machine, all that stuff. I'm not going to really get into specifics about that, but generally, D-Day is basically when the Allies finally landed and, really took the fight to the Nazis. And that's the whole point. Maybe we should, instead of celebrating Donald Trump, actually celebrate that. Anyway, maybe I was being a little hyperbolic during that segment, but anyway, let's go read some comments here. First, we've got a super chat here from Jedi Mullet 77, who said, trickle-down economics, this is the elite's way of saying urinating on you. If Pelosi doesn't want to do her civic duty, she needs to be impeached. Oh, interesting. That's the first call I've seen for Nancy Pelosi to be impeached. Interesting. A couple of member comments here. Sarge Tech says Trump gave the tax cuts to his rich friends and cronies. And don't forget, to himself, remember, in Trump's world, Donald Trump, the main question is, what can you do for me? Right? How does this benefit me? How does this help me? Elwell says, I'm reading Democracy in Chains. I'll help you understand the origins of the Trump Republican cult. That's a great book recommendation. I'll have to check that out. Non-member comments here. Evil Yoda says, I want them to drown in Bernie's tax reform. Well, to be fair, Elizabeth Warren says a lot about taxing the rich as well, and a lot of her policies. So let's be fair about that, too. There's, several Democrats with great plans in order to basically tax the rich. So I felt like it's a little unfair, leave her out. But yes, I definitely agree with you on that. And of course, you guys know I'm going for Bernie Sanders. Tia Wheeler says, honestly, I want to know what that money's going to do for them. And this is something that everyone should hope and wish against when the planet can no longer support life. That's another good question. What was that? There is that saying, when the last tree dies or whatever, you've realized that, or the last river is poisoned, people are going to realize they can't eat money. And that's what comes to mind right now. I'm sorry for the terrible paraphrasing, but you guys know the show already. I'm terrible at it. All right, anyway. All right. So let's move on. All right. Yes, several battles, indeed. Okay. I'm not going to disagree with that. Moving on. Now, Mike Huckabee likes to believe that he has a good sense of humor. That in itself is kind of hilarious, as a lot of right-wingers really don't have much of a good sense of humor. A lot of it relies on basically racist jokes, etc. Now, social media users, however, were also less impressed when he decided to tweet out a joke about D-Day and Germany. Now, this is what he tweeted, quote, must have been an awkward moment for Angela Merkel to sit in ceremony as the Allies commemorated D-Day that broke the back of Nazi Germany. What? Where's the joke? I don't see a joke in there. What's awkward about it? Okay, Merkel was born about a decade after D-Day, and today Germany is one of our top allies. What's awkward? I don't understand. Look, and you know why Germany is one of our top allies, by the way? After the war, we did something called the Marshall Plan. So we took resources, we took money, and we invested it into countries that were formerly our enemies. Germany, Japan, and a lot of countries in Europe that were devastated by the war. We did that. Now, of course, at the time after the war, Germany was divided into East and West Germany. So we poured a lot of resources and we helped rebuild West Germany, right? And I guess we helped rebuild Europe. Now, nothing like that, by the way, I don't think has ever happened before in the history of the world. And that's why I think up until Bush, especially Trump, the United States was considered leaders of the free world because of something amazing like that. And I would love to see a Marshall-type plan be used for climate change. That said, thanks to Republicans that are now isolationist and nationalist, we're no longer fit to be in this role. That said, his joke, right? Now, again, why would it be awkward for Merkel? I mean, the Allies, again, saved Europe and the world from fascism. Why would it be awkward for her? I don't know. I don't see any humor in that, and neither apparently did anyone else, especially considering how now liberal Germany actually is, which is the opposite of Nazism and fascism. Now, and I use liberal, of course, in the American context, which is understandably right-wing compared to the rest of the world. So let me just be transparent about that and put that into context. Now, let me read you some tweets here. Jay Relling says, Huckabee and his kind... I'm sorry. He said, how blind can to oneself can the elected leader of a former slave state, Arkansas, be to get snarky about someone else being the elected leader of a former fascist nation? Huckabee and his kind can just cannot see themselves when they look into a mirror. Now, of course, what they see in the mirror, I would guess, is some sort of hero, an American patriot. But apparently that does not seem to be the reality. In reality, what a lot of people see in the mirror, I think, is someone who is deeply racist and isolationist. Now, Holly said it must be awkward, be an awkward moment for Southerners to sit in ceremony as the nation commemorates July 4th. The celebration of the nation they tried to secede from. That right there, devastating. That is a devastating point and an excellent tweet. Michael Marshall Smith said, yeah, and the Queen was sitting there still in a snit about the American War of Independence. God, you're stupid. And so ignorant of Europe. And so unfunny. Oh. Gets better. Sharon Gibson says, Angela Merkel was never a Nazi, never a Nazi sympathizer, and she never called neo-Nazis very fine people. So why would she feel awkward? Again, great question. Mark Zaguire says, no, it wouldn't be awkward because Germans like Merkel have worked very hard to face and reject Germany's Nazi past and support liberal democratic values. You could learn a lot from Merkel if you were capable of doing so. Roland Scahill says, this is just a highly inappropriate tweet. David John Fuller says, the Germans have reckoned with their Nazi history, and it's an ongoing process. How is the United States coming along with reckoning with slavery, Jim Crow, stolen land? Again, that's a really good question. And on that, I don't think that we're doing very well. I mean, you look at the amount of racism today confined in the one specific political party. Instances of white people calling the cops on black people for basically doing nothing but living and doing normal things. The amount of voter suppression that we have in the South. We're not doing very good. We're kind of doing pretty crappy. Now, more tweets here. Great Scott says, Merkel isn't the one associated with Nazis, Mike. There are very fine people on both sides. Again, when your rhetoric resonates with neo-Nazis, that's generally a bad thing. Lizard says, it's almost as awkward as wishing the Japanese Prime Minister a happy Memorial Day. Wouldn't you say? Ouch. Binman said, it must be awkward being this stupid. Well, for him, probably not, because he's used to it. But I might even go with tone deaf instead of stupid. Nonetheless, doesn't surprise me at all if he doesn't even notice it or realize it. Those who are dumb often don't realize that they're dumb. Weird. Sarah Parsec finally with the best tweet. Must be awkward for you to be owned every time you tweet. Now, then again, I think that would involve having some sense of self-awareness, which I can assure you, people like Mike Huckabee often do not. I just go back to Huckabee playing guitar, playing a song with Ted Nugent. I think that song was probably about being with underage girls. Yeah. Ted Nugent's trash. And so is Mike Huckabee. So I guess they belong together. Okay. Moving on. Let's go to the DNC. All right.
Do you feel like this administration is listening?
Sorry, that was a wrong thing. Here we go. Yeah, Gary, I'm trying to figure out that noise. I'm not sure. It's probably due to old wiring, and I have to figure something out on how to eliminate that noise. But thank you. I'm well aware, and I've been trying to work on that. Okay, so now let's not mess this up. There we go. All right. Now, the DNC, or the Democratic National Committee, is now getting a lot of backlash after they announced on Wednesday that they would not host a climate-specific presidential primary debate and instead will also punish candidates who attend debates hosted by other organizations. So now, this is very important because, look, climate action is essential right now. We have less than 12 years to right the ship when it comes to alternative energy and getting off of fossil fuels. Now, knowing that context, why would you not want to have a climate-focused debate? Again, that's really, really important, right? But look, okay, so look, if the DNC doesn't want to host its own debate, okay, that's fine, right? And let's look at the reasons, right? The reason is probably they don't want to piss off their donors in the fossil fuel industry, which, of course, look, they eliminated the Obama administration's mandate to not take corporate lobbyists. And the DNC has not signed any fossil fuel, not taking fossil fuel money pledge. So they probably do get a lot of corporate fossil fuel money, or at least from these fossil fuel PACs. Okay, look, that's fine. It's not fine, but in the context of this, of them not hosting a debate, whatever. It would be nice if they did. But again, we know that the DNC sucks anyway, so that's whatever. We know that. The problem here that I have is punishing candidates who go to another debate. That's the problem here. That's the big problem. Okay? That's way too much. Now, of course, the decision to not hold any debates and to punish people for going to other debates on the climate was criticized by Governor Jay Inslee. Now, Governor Jay Inslee gets credit here because he was the first Democratic contender to call for a debate focused solely on the climate crisis. Now, he's been very focused on the climate. That's basically what his candidacy is all about. Now, he said, quote, "Today, my team received a call from the Democratic National Committee letting us know that they will not host a climate debate. Further, they explained that if we participated in anyone else's climate debate, we will not be invited to future debates. This is deeply disappointing." Indeed. He also said, "The DNC is silencing the voices of Democratic activists, many of our progressive partner organizations, and nearly half of the Democratic presidential field who want to debate on the existential crisis of our time." Again, very, very strong statement here. And he's right. There's a lot of Democratic contenders. Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, calling for this debate. Jay Inslee. I'm not sure who else, but I'm sure there are other candidates who are also very interested in talking about climate change. Now, Inslee continues. He said, "The next president must make defeating this crisis the top priority of the nation, and I will continue to do everything I humanly can to ensure the climate crisis is at the top of the national agenda." Now, environmental groups, of course, echoed Inslee's statement. For example, the U.S. Youth Climate Strike. Now, they launched a petition calling on the DNC to host a climate debate, and so far has over 53,000 signatures. Now, they vowed to fight back against the committee's refusal to give the climate crisis a national spotlight. They said, quote, disappointed to learn DNC will not honor the rallying cries of their own base. Again, that's not shocking. And will not only not host a climate debate, but will also ban any candidate who participates in one from participating in DNC debates. Again and again, the establishment and adults have failed us. We need policy now. Well, to be fair, that's kind of what the DNC is known for, ignoring their base. That's what they do the best. They ignore us, and they, of course, continue to push the establishment because they are the establishment. Now, Brandy Doyle, campaign manager for Credo Action, had her statement. She said, Tom Perez doesn't seem to care much about the climate crisis. Well, I'm sure he does care, actually. Just not as much as he cares about collecting checks to the DNC from fossil fuels. That said, she continues, this move is a slap in the face to the hundreds of thousands of climate activists and all of the candidates calling on the DNC to hold a dedicated climate debate. It isn't too late for Tom Perez and other leaders of the DNC to come to their senses. They'll find out soon enough that it's going to take a lot more than a quiet phone call to one campaign to silence the growing demands for a climate debate. Now, in an attempt to, of course, to calm the backlash, Tom Perez posted some rather frantic tweets, assuring that everyone that he has personally told media partners seeking to host a 2020 primary debate how important it is for climate change to be debated during each and every debate. Quote, the DNC will not be holding entire debates on a single issue area. We want to make sure voters have the ability to hear from candidates on all the issues. You have my word that I will do everything I can to make sure our candidates are able to debate the critical issues during this primary. I'm sorry, but I don't believe him. With so many candidates and so many issues, climate change is not going to get the time it deserves, even if you have the best of intentions, which I don't know if Tom Perez does. But here's the thing, right? And the reason that we're so skeptical is because we can just look at past debates. According to Grist, back in 2016, who wrote this article, we spent, media, I should say, spent 5 minutes and 27 seconds on climate change and other environmental issues in the 3 presidential debates that were held. That was a total of 2% of the time spent in debates. And most of that, of course, was Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton only talked for 5 minutes on climate change during the entire debate. Not only that, but there was a report published in April by Public Citizen that found that corporate media networks have systematically failed to devote sufficient time to the climate crisis, which activists argue should, given the existential threat it poses, dominate the headlines. Now, is it any surprise, of course, why we are so skeptical? We don't believe you. We don't believe you. We need a climate debate. Now, the Sunrise Movement, led by young people, said this, quote, this is an outrage. Almost every major candidate has supported the call for a climate debate, but the DNC won't even let the American people hear their plans for one of the greatest challenges of our time. This is an emergency. We need the Democrats to act like it. Now, one person that immediately responded to this was Senator Elizabeth Warren. She said late Wednesday night that Governor Inslee is exactly right. Quote, climate change is the biggest challenge we face. Every candidate running for president should have a serious set of policies to address it and should be eager to defend those proposals in a debate. And to that, I absolutely agree. Hear, hear. We need a climate-focused debate because, you know what? We all deserve to know who has the best ideas and the best policies to fight for our planet. They need to devote at least an hour. All we're asking for is one debate. An hour and a half. just to talk about who's got the better plans for climate change, who actually has a plan, and who might have copied a plan from someone else. Looking at you, Joe Biden. We deserve to know because, again, this is an existential crisis. I covered a report that said that it's a good possibility that by 2050, if we do nothing about this, we continue with the status quo, we could be looking at the end of human civilization by 2050. Or at least the start of the end of the human civilization by 2050. That's the disaster. We have to have this conversation, and we have to have it now. Okay. All right. Last story here. I think we're going to end up ending on time. All right. Here we have another instance of doing something while black and getting the police called on you for it. Now, this time it happened where a couple of black men were in a vintage store called Beatniks, and they decided to ask too many questions. Now, according to Raw Story, the owner of a vintage clothing store had called police on a black customer who asked a question about why he may have been selling racist merchandise. Now, this is Dennis Bird, and he and some friends had stopped by this establishment, which sells costumes, wigs, and various flags. Now, while he was in the store, he spotted a leather vest that had a Confederate flag, battle flag, imprint in it. Now, Dennis and his friend Dan Shade, asked an employee why they were selling the vest along with flags that celebrated LGBT rights. There seemed to be a rather strange combination here, right? Here we got your pride flags over here. Oh, and then by the way, you've got apparently your white pride flags over here in the form of the Confederate flag. Now, the employee had said, yeah, we sell vintage items. I don't tell anybody what to believe. Here, why don't you go talk to the owner? And that's what they did. Now, the owner is a man named Keith Passeri. Now, he said, when pointed out, that the vest was not appropriate to sell on the main floor. And he said, okay, look, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to toss it behind the counter. Well, now, even after that had happened, the two had a bit of an altercation, a bit of an argument afterwards. Now, before I get into that, I think that if you had kept it to throwing it behind the desk and saying, you're right, this is not appropriate to sell, that's fine. I actually do believe personally that all Confederate flags, all things Confederate, belong in a museum inside of a Racism in America exhibit. That's me. I would throw all those statues and all that stuff in a museum that points out what you should not do. Anyway, now, if they had left it there, fine. But apparently, the owner started talking about other things, apparently bringing up Jussie Smollett. And look, I'll be honest, I was skeptical of the Jussie Smollett story. Nonetheless, Smollett had been cleared of all charges, right? Whether or not you are skeptical of it, right? He has been cleared. Now, apparently Bird had said, hey, you shouldn't be making things up that aren't true, like the Jussie Smollett case. Now, apparently, the owner had believed that he wasn't attacked and had brought that into an argument over a Confederate vest, which is strange to me. It's very strange. And on that vest, of course, Bird said, I told him, why should we be subjected to symbols like this? As a black person, I am offended. I am offended by this. And he has every right to be. But unfortunately, that's when the store owner started to get a little bit angry. Now, the store owner said, quote, he was so combative, saying, get it through your thick effing skull. This is not racist. Well, now, wait a minute here. If it's not appropriate to have been held or to be on the main floor, you got to ask why. Why was it inappropriate? Well, it's because it's racist. You can't go and then argue that it's not racist. That's really strange. The story is very, very strange, right? Now, what happened afterwards, of course, is that, according to Bird, the owner had said that they were trespassing to get the F out, or he would call the police. Well, now that escalated very quickly. Now, if the owner had said, hey, look, we don't endorse this, I've removed it from the floors, is there anything else I can do for you? That would have been fine. That would have been a good way to handle it. Instead, we had somebody get upset, according to some of these guests. Now, of course, when an employee picked up the phone, Dennis and his friends decided to leave for fear of ending up in a police altercation. Now, the owner had his own explanation of what happened. He said, we do not sell that type of merchandise normally. It was not a shirt. It was a leather vest. And it wasn't being sold to support any such ideas. It was taken off the floor, and the customer didn't want to stop going on about it. And when he wouldn't stop, was asked to leave. And yes, the police were called. And when they came, they said they could arrest him for criminal trespassing. And I said, that would not be necessary. If you choose not to come to Beatniks, that is your choice. But based on this sloppy person's very poor listening skills, and you're insistent on arguing a point unnecessarily since the item in question was taken off the floor, it seems irrational. Okay, well, okay, that post is incredibly salty, right? So now we'll get to another account of what happened, right? Now, Bird said that numerous former employees and customers of Beatniks had reached out to him after this story had gotten out. And they shared similar experiences at the store. So the one experience, it sounds like he got mad and maybe he was annoyed from all the questions and the, hey, I'm offended. And why are you calling me a racist? I'm not a racist. I took this off the floor. But apparently, according to others, this is not the first time something like this has happened. Now, Christian Aguiano, a former employee who worked at Beatniks more than 10 years ago, said that he was not surprised by the incident, and he described a rule that apparently or allegedly was enforced when it came to black people in the store. Quote, the rule from day one is that anytime you see a black person in the store, you're supposed to follow them and continuously offer to help them or suggest items so they get annoyed and leave. We were told to ask any black person for their bag, to hold behind the counter, and if anyone else was nearby, ask for their bag too so the customers won't say anything. Now, Basiri, of course, denied instructing his staff to pay close attention to black customers, saying that he instructs them to keep a watchful eye on old customers, regardless of race, because he has had instances of theft. He said, quote, we lose about $100,000 a year due to theft, and it's almost put me out of business many times. People say that checking bags is racist, but we check everyone's bags because all kinds of people steal. However, according to other people who had worked there, like, for example, Armand Fields. Now, Armand Fields is actually the first black drag queen to win Roscoe's Drag Race. He had also worked at Beatniks a few years ago, but quit because it wasn't worth it. Fields said after quitting, they once were shopping in Beatniks when they witnessed Bakari use the N-word after calling the police on a group of black youth. So this is an interesting story, right? Because there's a lot of different angles here, and there seems to be a pattern, according to people who had either shopped there or worked there, of some racist attitudes. Now, Anguiano also said that he has heard Basiri use the N-word. Now, he says, no, it's not racist in its treatment of customers. We're not racist here. No, we don't do any of that. He said, I've been on Halstead for 30 years, so there have probably been incidents that weren't perfect or things that said that weren't perfect, but that's not the intent. Well, I'm sorry, but if you're saying the N-word, I think the intent is very, very clear. And you also talk about how, you've lost a lot of money due to theft, and so having this official but unofficial policy of checking black people's bags and then saying, oh, no, we're not just checking black people, we're going to check everybody's bags. I don't know. I think you see the intent here. At this point, though, it is kind of their word versus his, but his word, I don't think is holding up too well. And look, calling the cops on people asking questions, ridiculous. Again, you shouldn't be, you shouldn't have the cops called on you for asking a question or being offended by a piece of clothing, especially one where you can understand why offense was taken. The Confederate flag, no doubt, is a racist symbol, right? That's what it is. It stands for a country that based itself in enslaving black people. That was the whole point of the country, to continue doing that. So yes, if black people get offended, you should let them get offended because that is offensive. And not call the cops for asking questions. Just remove the piece of clothing as you originally did. Say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry this is offensive. We will not sell this. We didn't mean to have it there. There was an excuse that one of the stalkers said, oh, I didn't know the difference between a British flag, the Union Jack, and this flag, the Confederate flag. Oops, my mistake. That's a pretty weak sauce excuse, but and I wouldn't have went with that. No, you just removed it. You apologize, and you say that's not what we stand for. There was a million ways that he could have handled it, and none of the ones that he did were the right ones. And you have to wonder why. Okay. All right. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. I'm out tomorrow, so no show tomorrow. We'll be back on Monday. So, guys, have a happy Friday and a good weekend. And we'll see you with more amazing stories on Monday. So, please like and share if you haven't already. And we'll see you guys then. Oh, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, Nation. See you Monday.